What's up, Awesemo? PeteyMac, Greg Ehrenberg with you for the MLB Strategy Show over the course of the next hour, brought to you by Odds Shopper. Be sure to like, subscribe, get all that done. And I know how my day started today. Woke up with the baby at 6 a.m. I mean, toddler now, 2 years old. She's in the crib. She looks at me and just says, "Mommy," and not mommy. And then immediately just goes back to sleep like a 13-year-old teenager for the next hour. Like, I'm not playing with this doofus. I'm going right back to sleep, and then I'm just stuck up at 6 a.m. This is fatherhood. No respect. No respect.
I tell you, I don't get no respect. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not a father. Probably not going to be a father anytime soon. But yeah, that sounds.
Is it a me issue? Is she right? Like, is it just I got to work on some things, be more fun?
No, I get similar vibes when I see you in the morning. Also, it's like, this guy.
This guy again. But you're obligated. You're stuck with me for an hour. See, you can't just turn around, go into the crib, and fall asleep. It's tough on you.
No, I mean, I use guardrails on my bed though. You know, like, I mean, you gotta be safe, right? You don't want to have a nightmare and roll over in the middle of the night.
That's true. You can't be having that. There were some nightmares last night. If you were a big stacker and stacking all over baseball, like, it's crazy. The Blue Jays were the highest scoring team at 9 runs, but it's pretty much just Vladdy with 3 homers, a grand slam, doing that against Max Scherzer, and then it wasn't really until late in the night. At least the Rockies got to 7. Some other teams were in the mix. I know the Nationals, Trey Turner and Yadiel Hernandez were a nice couple to have together, but it was pretty spread out last night.
Yeah, it was definitely stacking wasn't the overall way to win first last night. You just needed all the guys who hit, like, hey, Trey Turner, him with 2 homers, and you get Vladdy with 3 homers. So a bunch of like weird individual ones. I know for me particularly, I was not on a lot of the chalk hitters last night, and it ended up being fairly, like, almost exactly neutral for me. I think like my actual like buy-ins to returns, it was like I had $832 in buy-ins and got back $831. Like, it was just an aggressively neutral night. Like, I think just being like not on Yankee stacks, and then also that I wasn't really high on Fernando Tatis for last night's particular slate, and then I was just a lot higher on Trey Turner. Like, that helped me a little bit because Tatis was ridiculously popular. But yeah, I mean, nothing sensational about last night's slate. It was aggressively neutral for me.
And it was interesting. We talked a lot about Lucas Giolito on the show yesterday. And like you're talking about, it wasn't a good start for Lucas Giolito, but the point total didn't kill you. There is a floor with these types of guys. And if Tony La Russa takes him out at a decent time, you end up doing a little better, maybe.
Yeah, and I mean, Giolito was my most rostered pitcher last night, so definitely would have liked a little bit better out of him. Like you said, he probably worked a little deeper in the game than he had to. He got off to a little bit of a rocky start, gave a run in the first inning, but then pitched a few scoreless innings in a row after that. But yeah, my two most rostered pitchers yesterday were Lucas Giolito and Ian Anderson. Anderson was great. Giolito, not so much. A little underwhelming.
Yeah, underwhelming. Let's put it that way for Giolito yesterday. So as far as this slate goes, you got one big pitcher at the top of Tyler Glasnow. I suppose you can put Carlos Rodon into that category as well. So we'll be getting into this, a 10-game slate. One of the unfortunate things is no Jacob deGrom, because that game starts at 6:40 for whatever reason in Queens. So we lose out on having deGrom being a part of it, which to me is a bummer.
Yeah, I mean, because he's basically been a free square so far this year, right? Like you get Jacob deGrom just every slate. Like, DraftKings is like, oh, Jacob deGrom, sure, 10,400, him and his 45 DraftKings points. This seems like an appropriate price for him. I would like to see deGrom get priced up to like a reasonable salary. Like, if we got him to 13,500, somewhere around that price point on like Fanduel and DraftKings, then we actually have decisions to make. I mean, obviously for today, it doesn't matter because he's not on the main slate. But yeah, I mean, if we get deGrom at a reasonable price tag, that would make some of these slates really fun with them. We actually have decisions.
To your memory, what is the highest that you have seen a pitcher cost to roster? I would think maybe Clayton Kershaw a couple of years back, maybe Max Scherzer at some point. But is there a wacky number that you remember as far as that goes?
I wouldn't off the top of my
deGrom's
head.
Probably in a different world right now because he's struck out 50 of the 101 batters he's faced this year. I mean, we just haven't seen anything like that.
So Chris Sale had a stretch where he had pitched a certain number of shutouts in a row for the Red Sox, or at least had games where like he'd allowed one or less earned run. And I think he got over 14,000 on DraftKings.
Wow.
I think I might be able to pull it up in Fantasy Cruncher. But yeah, that's the highest I could remember anybody. Maybe
And
Max
deGrom
Scherzer
deserves
got
to
up
be in that territory then.
Oh,
Like
he
he
definitely
should
does.
be one of the highest salaried pitchers ever, and it hasn't been there yet. So yeah, it's been a free square. Won't necessarily be tonight because he's not on the slate with the 6:40 start against the Boston Red Sox. So let's get into it. Yankees Orioles to start off. Kind of the same old story. It's been fade the Yankees the last couple of days, paid off big 2 nights ago. Not as much last night. Kyle Gashioka and Aaron Judge did hit home runs, but certainly didn't kill you. And they get Dean Kramer. That's who they're going against on the hill. And the Yankees, again, highly owned across both DraftKings and Fanduel.
Yeah, and it's the really exact same thing that I've said the last couple of days is that we have not as many games on tonight's slate, but still it's a 10-game slate, 20 teams to choose from overall. There's no weather concerns. That's a pretty frequent question we get asked from people. Is there going to be any rain on the slate? As of now, it looks like no. And the Yankees, once again, the most popular team on the slate, and by a very wide margin. We have the Yankees right now projected for nearly 20% ownership with an 11.1% chance of being the top scoring team on the slate, which, by the way, we don't even have them as being the team with the best odds to be the top scoring team today. That is the San Diego Padres, and the Padres only have half the ownership the Yankees have. So if I'm looking at one of the chalkier teams, I prefer the Padres, who actually we have going a little bit under-owned in our top stacks tool, whereas the Yankees, once again, just double the ownership compared to their projected odds of being the top scoring team on the slate. So therefore, for what feels like every day over the last week, I'm going to be underweight to Yankee stacks. They frankly haven't been a good offense this year. No. I understand that they're going to be good going forward, right? Like this isn't going to be a team that is going to continue to be a below average offense. But to this point in the season, we're talking about a team with a WRC plus in the 80s. And they are still continually being a really popular team in a way, just in a crazy way. So obviously there's going to be a day where they're going to be this highly owned and they're going to hit. But so far, fading them has worked out for me. And once again, I'm going to be pretty underweight for them.
Well, they're so, and this has been what Yankee fans have complained about for years now, is they're so home run centric. If that's how they're scoring their runs. And they might have a night, was a Friday night against Cleveland. They went out and hit 4 homers. And if you have a share of that, you're doing okay. But this has not been a team that's putting up, 10 plus runs in a game very often. And now, they're starting to make changes too. Aaron Boone talking with Gary Sanchez and essentially benching him. And now Kyle Gashioka, who's had some real nice games for them, is going to start playing a lot more. And I would guess we'll start seeing his price climb across DFS.
Yeah, and I think that on FanDuel, I don't think there's a real reason to consider him, but on DraftKings, where he's still a relatively cheap catcher and he's shown the ability to hit a little bit, he's not going to be somebody who homers, every single game, except given that he's still in the mid-ish, 3,200. So he's going to be, I assume, a really popular catcher. So I think, though, that that's probably warranted just because it's so hard to get production out of catcher and just how cheap he is. Talking about Yankees as a stack overall, let's see. When do you think is the last time the Yankees scored more than 7 runs in a game?
Only 7? Week and a half? Can't be that long.
Let's see. It's been not since April 11th, it looks like.
Wow, 2.5 weeks.
So even the last time, they haven't even scored. So the last time they scored more than 6 runs in a game was April 11th. It just hasn't been a high upside offense so far this year. It's going to happen at some point, but just not to the point where I'm going to say that 20% ownership is warranted for them as a team.
Yeah, it hasn't been the case even against Dean Kramer in Baltimore, offensive friendly ballpark, but that hasn't been the way that it has gone. Now, the other side of Higashioka handling the pitching staff more now, that's a plus versus Gary Sanchez. Domingo Germán, overall, not good numbers going into this game against Baltimore. Do you make anything out of Germán versus this Orioles lineup tonight?
So Domingo Germán is kind of an interesting case just because he's somebody who has a lot of ability as a pitcher, but He's been really consistent, let's say, both on and off the field for various reasons. So obviously,
it's a nice way.
So before last year, he was brought up on domestic violence charges and ended up getting suspended for pretty much an entire year. And then also at one point seemed to briefly retire on social media, then ended up coming back, and pretty spotty results so far this year. I still think there's a lot of ability there, so there's potential for upside. But I look at the Orioles as a stack for today. Only picking up 2.5% ownership while having a 7% chance of being the top value stack on the team, slightly over 4% odds of being the top overall stack. And just given the amount of inconsistency we've seen from Domingo Germán, and given also that the Yankees starters have struggled a little bit over the last week, so we've seen the Yankees really have to dig deep into their bullpen. I think that this is a good spot to take the Orioles as a contrarian play. And then one other thing I want to bring up before I go further is that Eric Smith brings up a good point in the YouTube chat. Was when I was looking at the weather for baseball games today, I totally overlooked that there is a very high chance of rain in the Cardinals game today, about 75 to 80% throughout the day. So actually, as of right now, I'm going to assume that game doesn't get in. But yeah, when I looked at the weather earlier, for whatever reason, I overlooked that.
Yeah, Baltimore, St. Louis, Chicago might have a little bit of rain, and there'll be the kind of things you just got to keep an eye on as the night goes. But for Yankees, Orioles, hey, maybe some runs in this game, and if you're fading the Yanks, you hope it's the Orioles that are ones scoring them as far as that goes. Free content on Awesemo.com today. You've got MLB player projections, also NBA ownership projections, same thing for the NHL, PGA Pro plays as well. So check all that out free, Awesemo.com. And of course, give us a like, subscribe, and you enjoy what you're seeing. If you are helping you out, hit on some DFS and enjoy some baseball on a given night. All part of what we're trying to do for you over the course of the next 45 minutes here on the Strategy Show. Washington, Toronto. I'll tell you what, I love this stadium in Dunedin, man. It's like so much fun. 7 homers last night. You got Trey Turner with a multi-homer game. Vladimir Guerrero's hitting 3 of them. He's doing it against Max Scherzer. This play, it's like arena football for baseball. I mean, it's home run derby at Dunedin. It's a totally different environment. It feels like early on in its existence to really any other stadium we're looking at in the majors right now.
I feel like they should not be playing Major League Baseball games in this stadium just because it seems so easy to hit homers there. And although, I mean, the 2 that Vlad hit off Max Scherzer, those were going out anywhere. But the one he hit, his 3rd homer that he hit to right field, like that, he kind of hit off the end of the bat and probably doesn't get out in most places. But yeah, I mean, Vlad might hit 50 homers because he's playing half his games there. And that's just a crazy, almost like a little league type ballpark. So as for today, we do have the Blue Jays picking up a ton of ownership for that reason, picking up 10% ownership. They are expected to be the 3rd most popular team on the slate behind the Yankees and the Padres. They're also really expensive. In particular, if we look at, Vlad, who one of the reasons, 2 reasons yesterday that he went solo owned on DraftKings. Number 1, because he was going up against Max Scherzer, but then number 2, he was 5,500. So I was talking with Tyler before the show started, and we were talking about Vlad, breaking the slate, but when he's 0.7% owned, it's not like you needed to have Vlad. Like, obviously, they come in first, needed to have Vlad, but it's not like you were sitting dead and had no chance of cashing if you didn't have Vlad Guerrero Jr. just because his price was so high.
Was Rowdy Tellez in the lineup too last night?
I don't.
That's another thing that could have, split his ownership. Where maybe you like Tellez's matchup against Scherzer more than say Guerrero. You can only squeeze one of them in.
Well, Vlad has 1st and 3rd base eligibility on DraftKings, though.
Okay, so it wouldn't be as big a factor.
No, but I mean, either way, still, it's just him being. And I'm curious what his ownership is projected for right now. He is currently projected for. And by the way, now he only has 1st base eligibility. Yesterday he had 1st and 3rd, but so after yesterday's game, he's still only projected for 2% ownership today. I have a feeling people might chase the points and go roster him again. If he's actually only going to be 2% owned, then yes, play him for the power upside. But if we get it to be later in the day where he's 5,700 and picking up like 15% ownership, then that would be something to stay away from.
And Guerrero, look, it's paying off for him, losing all that weight this offseason, maybe a little different ball player, one of those guys that actually made some physical changes that you could look at where you might be willing to throw out some numbers from the past as far as he goes. Steven Matz, there's no real physical change for him, but change of location, look, he's won all 4 of his starts for Toronto, a 2.31 ERA going into this game against the Washington Nationals, a team that is pretty familiar with Steven Matz. Are you buying into this is a completely new Steven Matz and that we should be jumping on the wagon at him as, maybe a top, maybe not top of the rotation, but a B pitcher across Major League Baseball?
Not really. I mean, also something is that I've been pretty anti Steven Matz for most of his career. Certainly, I think that there's reason to think he's a little bit better, but he's also been really lucky so far. He has a 214 BABIP to this point. That's going to regress. And still, I mean, if you look at like the Zips projection for him the rest of the year, he's still projected for a 4.85 ERA for the rest of the season. So then just trying to look at some of his numbers to see, what is it that he could have possibly changed? I mean, in terms of hard hit percentage, that is down a little bit. He isn't getting barreled up quite as much, at least compared to last year, where 13.5% of the time balls were getting barreled up against him. This year, it's down to 6.9%. Exit velocity against him, that's down a little bit. So at least at this point, he's certainly pitching better than he has last year, but not that that's very hard to do. It was terrible last year, but just given how poor of a pitcher he's been over the last couple of years, it's not like there's some crazy uptick in velocity or anything like that to where I think like, all right, Steven Matz is a totally recreated pitcher. It's something where I'd much rather be on the national side of the game than be on him, especially just considering how favorable of a ballpark this seems to be for hitters. So yeah. Washington tonight only picking up 3.5% ownership as a team, where we have them with 5% chance of being the top scoring team on the slate, and then also 7% chance of being the top value stack. Washington's a team that I like quite a bit, and I think that we're going to see some regression from Steven Matz just based on how poorly he's pitched in the past. I don't buy into just the 4 starts we've seen this year.
So we get Trey Turner to 3 homers tonight, and he goes all Vladdy on everybody. And by the way, yesterday, you talked about, look, I got Fernando Tatis Jr. owned at whatever it was, 35%, something like that yesterday. Or I could go to Trey Turner, Tim Anderson for a lot less. And look, that would have paid off big for you yesterday if you had Trey Turner in those 2 homers.
Yeah. So, and that was actually one of the reasons that that I was just, it was a neutral slate for me, and I didn't get killed or anything like that. It was just because earlier in the day we were looking at Fernando Tatis's ownership projection, and he was projected for 35% ownership, and I'm saying, well, that's ridiculous for any one individual hitter. Whereas we had Trey Turner and Tim Anderson both projected at that point in time for about 1/10 of the ownership that Fernando Tatis had. And that doesn't mean that I expect Tatis to be scoring less fantasy points than Trey Turner more often than not. It was just that Trey Turner is more than 1 out of 10 times more likely than that to end up outscoring Fernando Tatis. So it's just the difference in ownership. Today's a little bit different, where Tatis still very popular, 27%, Trey Turner at 14%. So it's not quite the same gap that we had projected yesterday, but even so, given the difference in ownerships between the two, I would lean towards Trey Turner as the stronger play because Tatis doesn't outscore him at a 2-to-1 clip.
Yeah, and this is the difference between season long and daily. Over 162 games, it evens out. Fernando Tatis is going to be the better player, but on one night, hey, Trey Turner could be the guy that breaks out, and Tatis doesn't happen to do a whole lot. Look, ownership percentages is something that can help you out a ton. It's part of our great Awesemo Plus tools. We got terrific content for nearly every DFS sport out there. So check out an Awesemo Plus weekly pass for $29.95. This includes full access to all the premium content and tools on Awesemo.com, including player projections, ownership projections, our premium Slack channel, lineup builder, and much more. And if you're only looking to play MLB DFS, you can sign up now for our Awesemo Plus MLB weekly package for just $15.95. So about half the price there. Stop guessing, start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. And it's such a unique thing to have an idea of what the ownership percentages might be on a given day and allow you to formulate your lineups in that way. Yeah.
And one thing about early in the day, they always, change quite a bit as the day goes on, but at least it's, somewhat of an indication yesterday. Like Tatis didn't actually end up being 35% owned in most contests yesterday, but he was still the most popular shortstop by a really wide margin. And his projected ownership did go down a little bit during the day, but still to the point where, like right now he's projected for 27%. And I could say with a very high degree of confidence that he's going to be the most owned shortstop tonight.
Yeah, well, and look at the team stacks. In the Yankees, it was like 20% Judge, 20% Stanton, all the way through. The only one that wasn't all that highly owned was LeMahieu last night. But that helps you if you want to make the decision. And maybe tonight's the night to fade the Yankees, as we've talked about over these the last few days. Next up, the best pitcher on the slate, I think, Tyler Glasnow, coming off a rough start. 6 innings, 5 runs against the Toronto Blue Jays. I mean, he still struck out 10, so it's never going to be that bad for Tyler Glasnow, and he gets the Oakland A's in Tampa Bay tonight.
Yeah, and by the way, that's the reason that there's so much security in rostering Tyler Glasnow. That was his worst start of the season by far. Pitches 6 innings, like you said, gives up 5 runs, strikes out 10. So he scores 19 DraftKings points in that start, and he was bad, right? Like from a run prevention standpoint, he was not great. He allowed 5 runs in 6 innings, still ends up being one of the better starting pitchers on that slate. So for the season now, we've seen him make 5 starts, and he scored 25, 26, 47, 24, and 19 DraftKings points. So I think that he's warranted to be a chalk pitcher on the slate. There's so much security there that I'm fine with paying up for Glasnow. He's going to be a core piece of my lineups.
Is there, what are we looking at tonight? And there's not a whole lot of competition. I suppose Carlos Rodon against the Tigers is the other top pitcher that you're looking at. And if you're going, pitcher first, you want to have that security blanket with a lot of upside. I think one of those two are going to end up being in most of your lineups on a given night.
Yeah, that's also generally how I tend to build my lineups. Like pitcher chalk, unless it gets really crazy, or if obviously if it's just a pitcher I don't like. But so like last night with Giolito, I was fine with playing a chalk Giolito. Tonight I'm going to be fine rostering a chalk Tyler Glasnow. I'm going to be fine rostering a chalk Carlos Rodon. I'm fine with going chalky at pitcher. Where I personally really differentiate is with my bats and my offenses, because that's where there's a lot more variance in baseball.
Yeah, a lot of different things can happen there. As far as offense goes in this game, Cole Irvin is pitching for Oakland. Do you like either of these offenses? I know a couple of nights ago you were on the A's offense.
Yeah, I've been on the A's offense a little bit lately, and it's gone poorly. They've definitely underwhelmed. And actually for today, we have them with the lowest odds right now of being the top scoring team on the slate. So I feel that should maybe be a little bit different, although I guess not, because it's really strong. It's a really tough matchup against Tyler Glasnow. But I would still think that maybe the A's have a slightly better chance of outscoring to like the Colorado Rockies. But yeah, a matchup against Tyler Glasnow, that's a no-go for me for Oakland.
And the other end for Tampa Bay?
And then the other end with Tampa Bay, to me, it's a team that's just going about appropriately owned and not really great odds being top scoring team. 3% ownership, 3% chance of being the top scoring team on the slate. So no real significant interest there. I think the Tampa Bay Rays, it's not a super difficult matchup against Irvin, but the A's do have a good bullpen behind them, and it is still a pitcher's park. So not really a priority for me.
Not a pitcher's park in Atlanta as we get to the Cubs and the Braves. Did you see Ronald Acuna Jr.'s home run last night?
Yes, especially because were we talking about that before you signed on before or not? I don't even remember.
Maybe you talked about it with our producer, Tyler.
Yeah. So I was talking about it with Tyler. I couldn't remember if you were on or not, but yeah, I'm pretty sure it was 481 feet. I think that's the longest home run of the season. Maybe Yermin Mercedes hit one longer, but I can't remember seeing one that was longer.
Come on. Eye test, 481 feet. The thing didn't even reach the concourse or something. I watched it. I expected to be awed by 481 feet. That's, 100 plus feet over the wall in left center field. I didn't see that yesterday. Come on. That's not 481.
No, I think it was, especially when you consider the part of the park it was to, right? It was to left center field. It made it to the top row of the bleachers, and that's the deepest part of the.
It was like the middle of the bleachers.
No, it was the top of the bleachers. He hit that far.
I'm going to have to check my internet connection if it's buffering. I'm not seeing that ball correctly. I don't know. I didn't think that was 481, but fine. Ronald Acuna, we know he's good, and he gets Kyle Hendricks tonight, who's kind of struggled, never really a big upside guy for Chicago. Huascar Ynoa is going for Atlanta in this game. I know the high-scoring series a couple of nights ago. What do you make of Cubs-Braves tonight?
Yeah, so starting with Kyle Hendricks, like you said, has not been good really at all so far this year. It's only 4 starts, 19 innings, but 5.68 ERA, a 5.52 expected ERA. And then if you look at Kyle Hendricks' numbers for his career, he's always a guy that's been much more effective at home than when he's on the road. So definitely a little bit of concern there. They're also, when you talk about a guy who's now over the age of 30 and has never really been a guy with great stuff or great strikeout stuff. He's always been reliant on his location. And you start to wonder if there's just any bit of a slight dip in a guy who already didn't have overwhelming stuff now on the other side of 30. Maybe there's a chance that he's just not very good anymore. And then also you look at how low owned the Braves are going tonight, only 3% ownership as a team. We have 5% chance of them being a top stack. I think this is a good contrarian play here. I think that if you want to pay up to be contrarian with some of these Braves guys, like we mentioned, Acuna, Freddie Freeman, they're expensive, but I mean, they're not getting owned. And Kyle Hendricks, to me at this point, I think still carries some name value. People are like, oh, I don't want to sack against Kyle Hendricks, but he's been terrible so far this season. And I think this is a chance that the Braves might be able to get to him, because I'm not totally sold on it, but I think there's a chance that Kyle Hendricks is washed.
How does it play on a night like that? Like, if you're going to pay up for the Braves and Acuna and Freeman, and you want to get Tyler Glasnow in there, like, how are you making all that work?
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't have to have Tyler Glasnow in all my lineups. The initial build I have Glasnow in 70% of them. And there are cheaper pitchers I like on this slate. So we've got Herman Marquez at 7,500. To me, he's a decent guy to save money with. Actually, in this game, Yuscar Yanoa at 7,800. I think that he's a decent guy to save money with, because the Chicago Cubs have struggled against right-handed pitching so far this year. And they've been a team that, like last night with Ian Anderson, I said that, like, on paper, this is not nearly as difficult as matchup as people might think when you just look at the names that are in the Cubs lineup. Because, I mean, the Cubs so far this year, while they have some good hitters at the top of their order, the bottom of the order is terrible. So the Cubs against right-handed pitching this year have an 82 WRC plus. That's 27th in all of baseball. They have a 27.8% strikeout rate against right-handed pitching. So the only team that's striking out more against righties than the Cubs are the Texas Rangers. So, I mean, you take all of that into account, and I think this is a pretty favorable matchup for Yanoa. He's not one of my most rostered pitchers or anything, but I'm overweight to the field on him right now. I have ownership to him in the teens, and he's only picking up single-digit ownership right now. So, Yanoa is somebody I'm pretty sure I'm going to be overweight to. And
even just eyeballing the Cubs, Javi Baez is one of those big names in the game. You watch him, I mean, it is all or nothing swing 1,000%. I mean, he's putting Sammy Sosa swings to shame, swinging just, straight from the heels. Everything's kicking out. And when he connects, it goes a long way, but he's not connecting as much as you might like.
No, it's a lot of swing and misses from that Cubs offense. So, I think is a good under the radar play given what his current ownership is.
Phillies Cardinals, and there are some potential weather concerns in this game. Not exactly a dynamic pitching matchup. Vince Velasquez is pitching for Philadelphia. Johan Oviedo gets the start for St. Louis. This is Oviedo's first start of the year, had been in the bullpen. Now, they say he has been stretching out the past few weeks at the alternate site, so he shouldn't be too limited. But, Oviedo's not a guy that I'm sure they're looking to get up to 95 pitches or anything like that. So you're looking offense in this game, Greg?
Well, once again, mea culpa, because earlier in the day, or not earlier in the day, but technically it was earlier in the day, because it was earlier. It was 20 minutes ago now, but I said there was no weather concerns, and I was incorrect. And Eric Smith, who is the resident Cardinals fan, who is always trying to tell us that the Cardinals are either the best stack on the slate. He's always talking about Spags and his bias against the Cardinals. He's telling me that Carlos Martinez is back. But here's where he was correct. He knew
Eric looked out the window.
he knew about the St. Louis weather, and where I look for baseball weather, I realized that when we started the show, I was looking at yesterday's weather report and not today's. So that was why I looked. I was like, "Hey, no weather issues," and I just hadn't refreshed the page for today. But yeah, so Phillies Cardinals in St. Louis today. We have 75 to 80% expected rain, basically the entire day and all through game time. So based on this, I think it's very unlikely that the game gets played. So it's a game that I'm going to be taking out of my player pool unless there's a drastic change in the weather report, but that doesn't look like it's going to be the case.
And this is something that I've talked to you about a little bit. You don't like the weather risk at all. You're not someone that wants to sit there and wait for the 90-minute rain delay and say, all right, maybe I get some guys a little lower owned because somebody else didn't have the stones to sit through the delay and see if they're going to play on a given night. You'd rather just don't sweat that.
It's not even a 90-minute though. It's expected to rain past midnight. So like there is no let's wait 90 minutes. It's 90 minutes from now it's still going to be raining based on the current weather report. So I mean, it's a case-by-case basis, but this one looks like one that's just not worth taking a chance on.
Okay. So there you go. Phillies, Cardinals, potentially a washout there. And then we'll get to Angels, Rangers in a moment. But, of course, our show brought to you by Odds Shopper. One of the biggest edges in sports betting, got to shop to find the best line. The betting lines could change by the minute. They can vary greatly depending on which book you're using. So it's important to check out Awesemo's Odds Shopper, all in one place, all these different books, giving you the different odds. You can find a better number here than there and make it all happen for you. So check it out, oddsshopper.awesemo.com. You'll find game lines, player props, player and team futures, and it's all updated in real time. So Angels, Rangers, the Angels, they've been popular offensively over the course of this week, maybe not as much tonight against Dane Dunning. And then Alex Cobb gets a shot at this Rangers lineup. Not that it helped Jose Quintana much a night ago.
No, it did not. He was not very good. And also ended up being a pretty popular, cheaper pitching option. So tonight, Alex Cobb, Cobb was also very, very terrible in his last start. But overall, you look at his numbers this year, and there's some pretty promising signs. He's striking out 13.19 hitters per 9 innings. The walks are higher than we normally see from him at 3.14. But, I mean, the strikeout stuff is enough for me to be pretty encouraged with him. He does have a 6.28 ERA, but it's a 3.78 expected ERA, a 2.52 FIP. I think the underlying numbers suggested there's a potential decent pitcher there. We're looking at a very small sample size, but it's enough for me to take a chance on him, especially when we consider, the Texas Rangers are a team, like I said before, 31.6% strikeout rate against right-handed pitching. There's no team striking out against righties more than the Texas Rangers. So we consider the strikeout stuff so far for Alex Cobb. I think that he is an okay GPP play, somebody at least that I want to be overweight to the field on. So right now he's picking up 10% ownership. I have 18% in the initial build I made this morning. So Alex Cobb in tournaments, sign me up, and hopefully the strikeout stuff from the small sample size to this point isn't a fluke.
To hope it plays up a little bit. And then Dane Dunning going up against this Angels offense that has some power up and down. What do you make of Dunning's chances to turn this into a pitcher's duel?
Not all that great. The Angels have such a good offense. Once again, DraftKings just incorrectly pricing Shohei Ohtani. I know he finally went hitless yesterday, but what are we doing here when Shohei Ohtani, one of the best hitters in baseball, is 4,200 on DraftKings with first base and outfield eligibility? That's just craziness. So, I mean, Shohei Ohtani just, once again, by far one of the best values as far as hitters go on DraftKings. The amount I actually want to get to him is going to depend on what his ownership ends up being.
And he wasn't dramatically owned last night. I think it was 20%, maybe a little under.
Yeah, and he's projected for 20% ownership right now, which I actually think what his price is, that's pretty fair. So the difference between him being a chalk play versus somebody like Fernando Tatis, number one, there's 3 outfield spots, and he also has first base eligibility. So there's 4 lineup spots we could fit him in total. So there's a lot more flexibility there. That end, he's cheap. Fernando Tatis is picking up almost 50% more ownership than Ohtani, and he's more expensive, and he's at a position where he can only roster 1 shortstop. So the difference with Ohtani, 4 spots we roster him, and he's just ridiculously underpriced. So I don't know what the deal is. Like, FanDuel prices him about fairly. DraftKings, not so much. So Ohtani is definitely somebody who's going to be a core hitter for me tonight.
And you look at guys that can, have that breakout night, breakaway kind of night like Vlad Guerrero Jr. did a night ago. I mean, Ohtani's one of those guys. I don't think anyone's going to be shocked if he hits 3 homers in a game at some point this year. He has that kind of pop. We've seen it.
Yeah, I mean, so let's see. I'm just going to pull up my Angel stacks I've made so far and see which guys I'm getting the most exposure to. Where are the Angels? Here we go. And by the way, also, Angels right now in the top stacks tool, they have the 3rd best odds, being the top scoring team on the slate behind just the Padres and the Yankees. Going about appropriately owned, but still, this looks like a team that I'm definitely going to want to stack just based on the overall odds of being the top scoring team on the slate and then about fair ownership. But yeah, I'm getting, by the way, Mike Trout is having an overall just ridiculous season. Like,
even for him.
You know what's crazy about Mike Trout is he's so good that it just goes overlooked, right? Like we look at all the Acuna highlights and everything, like, oh my God, look at the start Acuna's having, look at the start Ohtani's having. Trout is surpassing all of these guys and what he's doing in terms of, his weighted runs created and all that, and just his overall, like, his on base percentage and everything. But still, it just doesn't get talked about because it's just expected at this point.
Yeah,
right?
They were talking about it on the Angels broadcast. Like the other day, he comes back and he's 4 for 4. And he's like, we barely mentioned it because we're too busy talking about Shohei Ohtani pitching and playing in the lineup. And that becomes the story of the game. And it's Yeah, we talk about Mike Trout not being a major star all across Major League Baseball and marketable and things like that, but like he's not even the most popular player on his own team right now. I think you could argue. It's wild.
You know, it's really funny. So somebody had, because I place a lot of futures bets, and people DM me a lot on Twitter to ask me about my opinions on different futures and whatnot. And somebody's like, "Hey, I'm betting Ohtani to win MVP. Is he the best player on the Angels now?" And it's no. Like here's how ridiculous Mike Trout is. He's leading baseball right now with 1.9 wins above replacement. Like we said, like Acuna off to this ridiculous start, 222 WRC plus. Vlad Guerrero Jr. yesterday hits 3 home runs, 228 WRC plus. Mike Trout 273 WRC plus, just like lapping the field, and he barely even gets talked about. So it's still a thing where if you're paying up for any one hitter on the slate, if you have the salary for it, the guy to go to is still Trout. Like if you're only building one lineup, it's Trout over everybody. It's Trout over Acuna, Trout over Vlad. Like he's the best player in the league by such a wide margin, and we just kind of forget about it almost because we take how good he is for granted.
And he's having his best April ever. I mean, Ken Rosenthal tweeted, I think it was yesterday, so these stats might not be 100% at this point, but Trout's leading the league in a base percentage by like 100 points, and he's leading the league in slugging by like 100 points. I mean, it's just, there's nobody even close.
No, he has a 538 on base percentage so far, 815 slugging. He's just silly. But yeah, Mike Trout. And let's see, what is his, and by the way, it's not even like he's going that highly owned on a lot of slates. He's picking up 11% ownership so far today. Like that's a very easy number to get on top of.
Yeah. So you talked about Jacob deGrom being a free square as far as the pitching goes. Maybe you're not playing Mike Trout to the same percentage just because he's a hitter, but it's about as close as you get.
Yeah, not even though. Like it's really hard for me to ever roster any hitter and say more than like 25% of my lineups, just because there's so much variance there. And randomness is something I use in Fantasy Cruncher for baseball that I don't use as much for other sports, just because there is so much inherent randomness in baseball. But yeah, so like even as good as Mike Trout has been, like you look at his last 3 games, he scored 4 DraftKings points, 18 DraftKings points, and 8 DraftKings points. It's not like he's guaranteed to homer or have 14 DraftKings points every day. Like
an 8-point floor is for baseball. That's pretty dang good.
Well, he scored 4 3 nights ago. Also, like there's gonna be nights where he's he's knocking it a home run, and it's hard for me to ever say I have that much faith in any individual hitter. But yeah, but at least 11% owned for Mike Trout is a little bit too low, and that's a number that I'm definitely gonna be over the field on.
I'm underrating the value of the free square in bingo. I got to look at my bingo numbers again. Look, you have a big night. You hit on something. We want to know all about it. So be sure, tweet at Awesemo HOF. And look, we'll make it worth your while as well. You're playing on DraftKings, Fanduel, you name it. Download the Awesemo avatar from awesemo.com/avatar. And if you place in the top 3 of a contest with over 5,000 contestants, tweet to the Awesemo HOF account, Hall of Fame account, and you win a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. So it's pretty nice. You get the big hit, and maybe you get some more big hits along the way as well. And we're always rooting for you. We're hoping to give you the good advice and see you up there atop the leaderboards.
Yeah, I'm always rooting for myself, but if I don't win, then I hope one of you guys do. But or else, like if I'm in the contention, then screw all you guys. I want to win. Except if it's not me, if I see somebody with the Awesemo avatar, I'm definitely pulling for them.
I saw somebody was challenge you on social media the other day. They saw they're in the same contest as you, and they're like, "I'm coming for you." Did you edge them out?
I don't know. Like there's that stuff all the time. Somebody sees like, oh, you have a close lineup to me. I'll play for $1 million in head-to-head. It's like, okay, whatever. But like, yeah, I mean, that's like a daily occurrence.
All right. Tigers, White Sox, Carlos Rodon has just been fantastic this year. This was an A+ prospect back in the day. Struggled to stay on the mound. He's healthy right now, a 0.47 ERA. You know about the no-hitter at this point. And he gets the Detroit Tigers, who, as we talked about yesterday, have been horrendous offensively. All right, they scored some runs against Lucas Giolito last night, but they've been even worse against left-handers. I mean, they have Mike Minor destroyed them in a game last week, and now they get one of the hottest pitchers in baseball throwing from the left side. What do you make of this matchup for Rodon? Really the only one that's going to come close, I think, to Glasnow versus the Jays.
All right, so listen to these numbers for the Tigers against left-handed pitching. A 42 WRC plus, that's impossibly low. As if that isn't bad enough, they're striking out in 34.2% of their plate appearances against left-handed pitching. So we have a team that not only can they not hit lefties at all, they're striking out over a third of their plate appearances against lefties. Carlos Rodon, he's generally been effective in his career when healthy. He's just very, very rarely healthy, and there's a little bit of variance with him because sometimes he does lose command of the strike zone. But I mean, in general, we're looking at one of the best matchups possible here. And honestly, where there aren't that many pitching options I like, Carlos Rodon is definitely a very, very high priority play for me.
And I should say Glasnow against the A's, not the Jays. But does it reach a point where because of the matchup, you like even Rodon over Glasnow or not quite?
Not quite, just because Glasnow still has to me at least, has a much higher baseline out of the pitcher. So if I was to project just in neutral matchups, the amount of fantasy points going forward for Carlos Rodon and Tyler Glasnow, I'd still have to be a lot higher on Tyler Glasnow just because of his strikeout potential. And Carlos Rodon, it's still this quite quality of pitching from him. Like, this isn't familiar, right? Like, we've seen him have high upside in the past, but we've never seen him consistently pitch this well for an extended period of time. So just because Glasnow, I think, is a much better overall pitcher, it's still Glasnow is the priority, but a Rodon number 2 for me. And he's popular, but once again, for good reason. I think these are the two guys to get the most exposure to on DK.
You could tell us about the ownership rates, but you look at the pitcher for the Tigers, Casey Mize, another hot prospect back in the day that as of now hasn't really lived up to it. And I always like stacking the White Sox. I mean, that's a fun offense to watch. They put up some runs. They've had some big games this year, certainly last year. What do you make of this matchup for Chicago?
Yeah, one of the most under-owned teams on the slate, and actually something we've seen fairly commonly in Casey Mize starts, is that I don't know if it's the name value with him as a prospect or maybe just randomness. This happens to be the case, but it seems that people don't really like stacking against him all that much, and that shouldn't be the case. So we have the White Sox stay with, once again, about 5% chance of being the top stack on the slate. There's a few teams in that range, but the White Sox only pick up 1.6% ownership as a team. So I consider those numbers, and I look at the White Sox as one of the teams I want to have the most exposure to tonight.
Any White Sox in particular jump off the board at you for this matchup against Mize?
Yeah, I'll pull up the stacks I've built so far.
I mean, Mercedes, he's kind of like Yakil Baddoo. After a while, you got to start taking him seriously this year with what those guys have been doing.
Well, one thing about him is he doesn't play every day, and he's 5,000. So, like, you get to a point. You get to a point where it's like, well, he has first base eligibility. Would I rather roster Yerman Mercedes or Jose Abreu? And it's Jose Abreu for me. It's not even like that. That's not even really a knock against Yerman Mercedes. Where I
didn't realize his price had climbed that much. Wow.
Yeah, it's just that he's really expensive, and Jose Abreu he's the MVP last year. I think he's better. If we're looking at the end of the lineup, there's some viable value options in like Nick Madrigal. I think that he's viable for cheap. Andrew Vaughn, I think, is viable for cheap. One of the top hitting prospects in baseball. That hasn't really resulted in fruitful fantasy output so far, but still, I'm willing to any of these top prospects that are in a plus matchup that are this cheap. I think it's worth getting to them because I'd rather be ahead of the ball than behind it. Where I don't want to find out that Andrew Vaughn is a top 60, top 70 hitter in baseball after he's already priced up to like 4,500 or 4,800. I'd rather roster him and take the chances when he's in the low 3,000 range. Adam Eaton towards the top of the lineup. He's fairly cheap. The guy that I have the least interest in relative to their price tag right now is Johann Moncada. He has really struggled so far to open the season. I just don't know what to make of him. He's a guy who's always struggled to make contact, but generally he's at least made it worthwhile when he's made contact with the baseball. And that hasn't been the case this year. His exit velocity is way down. And I'm going to pull up those numbers right now as I'm talking, but that's at least off the top of my head. His exit velocity is way down. And I just kind of have some overall concerns with him as a hitter. While he has a 114 WRC plus, it's a little bit because of favorable BABIP at 330. And let's see, exit velocity of 109.4 miles per hour this year, where for his career, his exit velocity's been or 109.4. That's his max. Where's the here we go. So his hard hit numbers 34% versus 42.3% for his career. He's still only barreling the ball up 9.4% of the time. I think for the price tag on Johann Moncada, where he's priced as one of the most expensive third basemen on the slate, there's other guys I'd rather pay up for than Moncada.
And then the White Sox, they'll be without, as we know, Eloy Jimenez, who they're out most of the year, RIP, with how they handled that for their home opener. And then Luis Robert is probably out as well. He had some flu-like symptoms, and everybody being cautious in this pandemic era. When you join Awesemo Plus, you join a community, and the tools and projections, they're great, but you can also gain access to our premium Slack channel where you can talk strategy or just talk smack to Greg. It all helps out. Participate in office hours with our Awesemo experts. You can on the latest updates to projections from Alex Awesemo Baker himself. Also, it's a favorite feature for many of our subscribers and an added perk to any Awesemo Plus package. So check that out as well. What describe what the Slack is like? What's generally the conversation in there?
It's a lot of people getting upset, but like in a fun way, right? So people are upset, like somebody homers in the first at bat of the game. You didn't play him. You lost all your money. A pitcher gives up a single. He sucks today. So a lot of tilting, but then there's also usefulness to it. I answer a lot of DMs. People ask me like, hey, what do you think of this guy or this guy? What's your strategy for the slate? So there's good utility to it. But also if you just like panicking, sweating DFS, getting upset, Slack's great for that as well.
It's nice to have that community for it, right? If you're, it's hard to find the sports bar that has a bunch of people with Draftkings lineups, Fanduel lineups that are going nuts about that aspect of what's happening, or that have, let's say 10 baseball games on. But hey, you got some people that are in the same situation you are and upset that Lucas Giolito gave up a first inning run and therefore he sucks in the night's over.
Yeah, that's
Ohtani 2 nights ago, maybe the better example.
Yeah, oh, for sure. If you like overreacting, Slack is for you.
Everything's for you these days if you like overreacting. All right, 3 games to hit. Seattle, Houston, Justin Dunn for the Mariners. Zach Greinke, he's getting it done somehow, some way. A sub-3 ERA. I don't think the projections love him tonight against Seattle, but he seems to be overperforming to this point in the year. What do you make of Greinke?
I think overperforming is the nice way to put it. Zach Greinke now at 37 years old. He's still, to me, like overall a good pitcher, except from a fantasy standpoint, he's only striking out 6.06 hitters per 9 innings. So it's tough to really find a substantial amount of upside in him. Also, I think there's going to be a little bit regression on his 2.76 ERA when you consider that he has a 3.69 FIP, a 4.02 xFIP. He only has a 286 BABIP so far this year. He's allowing a lot more fly balls this year. His ground ball rate is down. So I think that the 2.76 ERA for Greinke, not all that sustainable. The lack of strikeouts is a bit of concern, especially when you consider his age and the decrease in velocity. Only has about an 88.5 average fastball velocity at this point in his career. So Greinke, the way that he's pitching right now, not somebody I want to consider in DFS, but by the same merit, he's pitching well enough to where I don't want to stack against him either. So it's something where I don't want either side of that, really.
Well, how about this? So 2 starts ago, Greinke threw against the Mariners, and it was 8 scoreless, 6 strikeouts. That is his best night of the year. What do you make of the second time a team is going to see a pitcher, or even division matchups where someone might be familiar? If a pitcher had a big start against a team recently like that, do you factor that in at all, or are you just looking big picture and that's it?
Yeah, I'm just looking at big picture. Like because there's multiple ways you could look at this, right? Like you could say like, oh, the hitters got a second look at, like they just looked at Greinke, so therefore they know what to expect. But then Greinke would also say, hey, I already exploited these guys. I know what their weakness is. And both of those are, they're valid narratives, but it's something that's ultimately going to be written after the game's over, right? So the game's going to end if Greinke pitches well. It's going to be like, well, of course, he owns the Mariners. If Greinke pitches poorly, it's going to be, well, they just saw him, so they got a better look at his stuff. So I don't know which side of that wins out, but I know that that's a kind of a narrative that gets written after the game's over. It's not something I could really predict before it starts. So
it makes everything seem so damn easy to predict, right? Like if he shoves tonight, the broadcast is saying, well, he owns the Mariners, of course. And then if he gets whacked, it's, well, they saw him. Like you said, it gets written after the game, during the game, whatever. But it's frustrating on our end when we're trying to predict all this stuff. It's like, oh, of course. Why didn't I think of that?
Yeah, and then once again, it's just the price is too high. 9,400 on DraftKings, 9,000 on Fanduel, and just the lack of strikeout upside. Like on Fanduel, on a single pitcher site, like what is the odds of him being the top scoring pitcher on the slate? Well, we only have him with 4.9% chance being the top pitcher. There are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He's the 9th highest ceiling pitcher on the slate, at least in our Fanduel projection being the highest scoring pitcher, and yet he still has a 9,000 price tag. So, it's a favorable matchup against the Mariners, but he's somebody who I'd view as having a much higher floor than high ceiling, and there's better pitcher plays with more strikeout upside today.
Well, it was Garrett Richards on FanDuel yesterday, so
this is true.
No bad lineups, Greg.
Well, like Garrett Richards, like you can make a case that whatever he was a reasonable enough play, but like it's and any pitcher could go off at any one given time, right? There's a lot of variance in baseball, but I'm not going to be playing Zach Greinke all likelihood today.
And especially when it's the Mets, just weird things tend to happen there in Queens. San Diego, Arizona. Ryan Weathers goes for the Padres. Taylor Widener for Arizona. I don't know. Is there like a hangover after that Padres-Dodgers series? I mean, that's one of the narratives that's out there right now. But San Diego, not an inspiring performance last night against Arizona.
No, they didn't pitch. They didn't pitch. They didn't play well yesterday. I look, Chris Paddock in general is kind of an underwhelming pitcher to me, but David Weathers to me, pretty interesting fantasy option. He pitched
Ryan
really
Weathers.
Well.
David's the dad.
Oh, did I say David Weathers?
Yeah, you slipped it in.
My bad. Well, Ryan Weathers, his son, only 21 years old, a fairly well-regarded pitching prospect, came into the year as one of the top 10 prospects in the Padres organization. Look at the results so far this year. Striking out over a hitter per inning. A lot of that has come out of the bullpen, but still only a .59 ERA. And he pitched, like I said, really well his last time out against the Dodgers. And the other thing, too, is I'm going to bring up his exact pitch count. They let him pitch much deeper into that game than I was expecting him to go. I thought that he was going to be, really capped on his pitch count. He ended up throwing 89 pitches. So, I mean, he looks like a full-time starter at this point, even though he's only made 2 starts. He's also had time come out of the bullpen. So Ryan Weathers picking up almost no ownership right now. On DraftKings, he is projected for how much ownership was it? He's only projected for 1% ownership right now. Like that is a number I want to be way over the field on, because I think people are maybe not hip to the fact that Ryan Weathers is a full-time starter now and is not really inhibited at all.
And if you like 90s baseball, the Padres and the Blue Jays are for you, with all the kids running around on these teams. Obviously, Tatis and Weathers there in San Diego. I like David Weathers back in the day. I mean, he had some stones late in games, postseason games, on a lot of good teams over the course of his career. How about on the other side, Taylor Widener for Arizona?
Yeah, no real interest there. And then certainly the Padres, this is a team to stack up. We have them with the best overall odds of being the top scoring team on the slate today, while also not picking up as much ownership as they should be. So a team, 11.3% chance of being the top scoring team on the slate, actually slightly higher than the Yankees. But the difference is the Padres are projected to be picking up 10.6% ownership. The Yankees 19.3% projected ownership right now. So we have the Padres with about half the ownership, but slightly better odds of being the top scoring team on the slate. So the Padres are definitely a team to get to tonight.
And look, I've only been using this top stack tool for this season, but it seems rare that you have a team that's the second highest likely to be the top stack of a given night, and yet you get a positive leverage on them. I mean, that's usually pretty tough. Usually people recognize those top 2 or 3 teams, and then you have too many that are playing chalk there. But to get positive leverage on a team that has a 10% chance plus of being the top stack of the night, that's one you want to play.
Yeah. So Padres are definitely a very high priority for me at the moment.
Okay, so the Padres one you want to look at as they go up against the Arizona Diamondbacks. And finally, it'll be the Rockies and the Giants. I feel like they might have thrown a monkey wrench into some lineups yesterday. It's a relatively high-scoring game and has been over this week, at least in San Francisco, at least from the Giants' standpoint, I suppose. But Brian McMahon ended up, CJ Cron ended up in some of the top lineups on DraftKings and FanDuel. German Marquez, these Rockies pitchers, it's kind of hard to look at the ERA and judge them. We know they're at Coors Field, very difficult place to pitch. And then you go to the place that's almost the polar opposite. Generally, they're at Oracle in San Francisco. What do you make of Marquez against a Giants lineup that has been hot over the course of the past couple of weeks?
All right, so let's start with the Marquez side, because I do think that he's a viable SP2 on the slate. And also to your point about his overall numbers, it's a little hard to really gauge them correctly when he's making so many starts at Coors Field. But even so, this year, we're talking about a guy who strikes out about a hitter per inning. Always somebody who throws hard, 95.2 average fastball velocity this year, 3.45 ERA. So, all of that looks pretty solid. I'm going to bring up his splits for his career when he is pitching home versus when he's pitching on the road. So there's a pretty noticeable difference. At home, he has a 4.96 ERA, which, hey, surprise, he struggles pitching at Coors Field. So does every other pitcher. But when he's on the road, he has a 3.53 ERA, and he strikes out over a hitter per inning for his career. So, I mean, you take German Marquez out of Coors Field, then he pitches, pretty well. So all that considered, I think that he's a guy that I want to get to as an SP2 on the slate. He's not picking up all that much ownership right now. If I want to pay up for an offense, him and Ryan Weathers, as well as Alex Cobb, those look like the cheaper starting pitchers I want to target for today. As for stacking against him, that's going to be a no-go for me. I know the Giants have played well recently, but only a 2.4% chance being the top scoring team on the slate for us today, but picking up 4% ownership share. And the Rockies also a team I want to stay away from, only a 1.7% chance to be the top scoring team of the day.
So does that mean you're jumping on Alex Wood here? He 0.75 ERA for Wood in the with the Giants so far this season.
He's not popping up in my builds right now. A lot of it's because of he is projected for a lot of ownership right now, and I think that there's some decent pivots in that price range. So 8,300 for Alex Wood is an SP2, and on Fanduel single pitcher site also, I don't really think we need to consider Alex Wood, but I mean, I would rather get to Alex Cobb, Ryan Weathers, German Marquez. All these guys are cheaper, who I don't really think have that much significant different expected outcomes than Alex Wood. And then also there's a big ownership difference. Alex Wood projected for nearly 30% ownership. I mentioned we could get Ryan Weathers for 1% ownership. German Marquez coming in with a little bit less ownership. Alex Cobb only projecting for 10% ownership. So, I mean, all these guys are just a fraction of the ownership of what Alex Wood is. It's really an issue of he's 8,300 and just really, really popular.
I'm surprised he's that popular at that price, especially on a night where Glasnow and Rodon seem to be the A number ones that you're going to want to shoot at over and over.
Yeah, for sure. And then, I mean, the other thing too is we talked about what a good spot it is for Rodon. Well, Rodon on DraftKings is projecting for 35% ownership right now. Alex Wood's projecting for 29%. So there isn't that much difference. And then even the price difference, Alex Wood 8,300 to Rodon at 9,800 for $1,500 price difference and somewhat similar ownership. Much stronger preference to play Carlos Rodon.
And if you're just looking at ERAs, I mean, Rodon's got a beat there too, even with both of them sub-1 so far this season. Free content on Awesemo.com. We got the MLB player projections you could check out. NBA ownership projections are free as well. Same with the NHL, and PGA Pro plays are on the site as well. And always be checking that out over at Awesemo.com. Free content every day there as it varies. And tune in to us to find out what the free content is and get an idea of what some of the top stacks, top pitchers, and ownership rates to play. Like, subscribe to the show, make the strategy show, MLB strategy show, part of your daily prep to get ready for a big day. And if you want to go all in, hey, Awesemo Plus, get into the Slack. Start talking smack to Greg and bemoaning the fact that Carlos Rodon walks the first batter of the game tonight.
Yeah, and most importantly, troll me. Whether it be on social media at Mlb Dfs, whether in your YouTube chat, Slack chat, trolling me, I think that is a very important part of the user experience.
You have thick skin, so you say.
Yes, I think so.
At this point in life, thick skin for Greg Ehrenberg. But hey, we got a lot more coming up on the Awesemo YouTube channel coming up at 2:00 Eastern. The NHL strategy show, the MLB deeper dive comes your way at 3 Eastern, and then the tip-off at 4 o'clock. Always a pleasure, Greg. Our thanks to our sponsor, Odds Shopper, and check out oddsshopper.awesemo.com. Producer Tyler, I'm PeteyMac. Happy stacking, guys.